Hello and welcome. Welcome to Around the Town with Mark. I am Mark Whalen, your host, and we are always glad to have you tune in and visit with us. Well, we are a nautical submarine town. We are proud of it. We have a great history of being called the submarine capital of the world, and we really are. My guest today, as you can see his book, is author Ryan C. Walker, and he's going to tell us all about his wonderful book about the Silent Service's first hero and all things that he knows all about the Secret Service, the Silent Service, and all those things. Let me just get this out of the way just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Ryan C. Walker, my guest and author of this fabulous must-read book. Ryan, so introduce yourself to myself and our guest. Tell us a little bit about who is Ryan C. Walker and how you came about this great book.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Today I'm going to discuss my book, The Silent Service's First Hero, but I'm a naval historian. I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom. I studied my master's there.
Congratulations, that's big time.
It's a wonderful school. My supervisory team has been phenomenal. Rob James, Matthew Heaslip, and Catherine Pierce all have been a great influence on my style of history. They're some of the best supervisors that I could have ever hoped for. And I got my undergrad at Southern New Hampshire University. So I ended up at Portsmouth. It was funny. I was looking for a master's program online, and they were one of the ones that came up. Applied, and I managed to get in, and it's been a fun ride ever since. And this is a product, actually, of one of the assignments I did during my master's program.
Really? Wonderful.
So when I showed up here to Groton in 2015, and it was February in the middle of a blizzard. And the reason I came here was Great Lakes Recruit Training Command. And Great Lakes Recruit Training Command is the place where all sailors start their voyage. I came to Providence, and the very first day I got a duty driver, and the very first day at Basic Enlisted Submarine School, they hand you qual cards, they hand you all sorts of stuff that you're going to get used to in the Navy. But one of the assignments I was very excited about, it was a scavenger hunt at the Nautilus Museum.
Really? Oh, great.
And I'll never forget
It's a wonderful museum.
Oh, I
Fabulous.
highly recommend visiting. I go there all the time for their archives. They've been a major part of this. I go down there with a group of friends, because I'd always loved history. I always knew I wanted to be a historian. It's part of the reason I joined the Navy, to get the GI Bill to go do that. And the very last question was, who was the only enlisted submariner to receive the Medal of Honor? The answer is on the cover of the book. It's Henry Brough.
Oh, okay.
And Brough is also not only the only enlisted, he was the first. He received his award in 1924, March 8th, 1924 specifically, so we just celebrated his centennial. But I remember staring at the exhibit and seeing the picture of the smiling god with the cropped hat, and it's in that moment, that was the first time I realized that's what a submariner is. So it never left me from 2014 to 2019 when I was discharged honorably. And when as I did my history program, I found myself gravitating more towards naval history topics. So that's why I ended up doing naval history, and specifically Portsmouth. And I had two assignments. I knew what my major, which was my thesis, my master's thesis, I knew what it would be. It was going to be on private men of war, British private men of war in the North Atlantic. But the second one, I was like, you know what, I've never looked into his story. And sure enough, there wasn't much on it.
Really?
Very little. Actually, the exhibit I saw was based off of a couple of genealogical records, newspaper clippings, census records, Royal Navy Canadian Volunteer Reserve records, and two articles by a man named Julius Grigor Jr. They were published in the Military Engineer in 1969 and Proceedings in 1972. They focused on the escape mostly. Brough's story was kind of tangential, but the Panama Canal community did amazing things to rescue the two men. But Brough put them in a position to be rescued. He was in the torpedo room when a collision happened, and he had the chance to escape. He realized the ship was sinking, and with that little information he had to make a split-second decision. Do I escape and leave the people who are trapped below in great peril, or do I try to help? And he said, as a quote from a newspaper, I didn't know what was happening. I wanted to stay and help if I could.
Oh, that's right on. Yep.
Yeah, to me, that is exactly what being a submariner meant.
Absolutely. Yes, that's what I've learned from my family in the past. It's not about you.
Yeah,
It's
so
about your crew.
so Bro represents, in my mind, the enlisted submariner. Bro represents, because he's the only one of us to receive the Medal of Honor, and likely the only one for the foreseeable future. He has come to be a folk hero. He's come to represent more than himself. He's come to represent the essential duty of the submariner. And I like to think with this, because I had insight, I found his official military personnel file, which had never been actually analyzed.
Really? Wow.
And not only that, it was digitized at the the St. Louis National Archives in the persons of exceptional prominence. So that was where it was kind of one of those unique moments where my experience as a sailor, as a submariner, interacted with my history career, because I had that special insight that no one had gotten to look there yet.
That's a great combination.
Sure was.
Yeah, you should be very proud of yourself.
So
Obviously.
with that, I was able to add 500 documents to analyze his life and times.
Mm-hmm.
So I know a lot of people will read this. You might read this and say, wow, that was a really good biography. I kind of step away. On the back, you can read it says it's a micro-historical investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because I don't have the sources from Bro. Now imagine taking records from the DMV and piecing together where people lived based off of that. Mm-hmm. That's almost what I did here, because every sailor has a bureaucratic identity associated with them in the form of the official military personnel file. So if you took someone's records of their work, that's what this is. So I was able to find out he was married, something we didn't know. How did I find that out? Based off of a reimbursement sheet for dependents when they moved.
Really?
Yes. So it's small things like that. That's microhistory. I had to piece together these clues to kind of figure out exactly what his life and times were like.
Wow. I see you have some fantastic photos and historical photos and all kinds of things in this book is, I mean, I haven't read it yet. I hope to, but it's packed.
It's a relatively compact book. It's 232 pages. A lot of it are endnotes for people who want to continue on the research or are interested in how I got to the conclusions I got to. But it traces his career, which is something we knew sparse details about. But he was a special sailor. He actually gets his Medal of Honor on March 8th, and he goes up to New York City where his parents were living, White Plains, New York specifically. And when he's leaving, they interview him. Like, what's your plans? What are you going to do now that you have that? Are you going to stay in the submarine force? And he said, I hope to tell you, which is actually, I go with much detail in the book, but it was a older statement, about kind of antiquated now, of emphatic affirmation. He fully intended to stay in the submarine force. The only reason he stopped is in 1935, he was disqualified for eyesight.
Okay.
And that's a special, we knew he had glasses, but at the time you didn't wear glasses because it was before 2012 when they were cool.
Oh, okay.
So being a sailor, he didn't want to be seen as an intellectual, so he probably didn't wear them. And at the time in the 1930s, despite the fact that all the turmoil in the world that we were seeing, they were downsizing the Navy. In 1933, they got down to 88,000 enlisted sailors.
Wow.
So they started immediately ramping up, but in 1935, he probably had a doctor who hadn't gotten the memo yet and disqualified him, and they sent him to a submarine tender. And then he got sent to destroyers. But I don't think he ever stopped wanting to be a submariner. As a matter of fact, I have a requalification standard in 1938. So he was able to be requalified, and in 1940, he was sent off to the New London Submarine Base to get fully qualified physically. During that examination, they found the heart condition that would end his life in December 5th, 1941.
Oh.
2 days before Pearl Harbor.
Really? Wow.
Which is part of the reason why his story kind of got lost. It kind of got forgotten until about 1986 when he's from Putnam, Connecticut. Okay. The Aspenok Historical Society found one of his relatives, actually a pallbearer at his funeral. His name was Fred St. Onge. They did an interview with him and they rededicated a new Medal of Honor tombstone.
Wow.
And then that story soon got picked up by the Submarine Force Library and Museum, the Nautilus Museum. Mm-hmm. The curator started making an exhibit for him. Then it was found by a retired senior chief petty officer, Jim Chrisley. Chrisley then put that up to Al Kuznetsy, retired vice admiral. Well, at the time he was rear admiral and he was in Pearl Harbor, and they dedicated a pier in his memory in 1999. And that was followed by the submarine base. They added from Arnie Lotring, now retired rear admiral. He actually did a plaque that I saw when I was in submarine school, and that's when they started making him part of the identity again. So we're happy to have that. That's how it got to me.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm happy to add to that story so people understand who this hero was and that he was special. He was ordinary in a way, but what he did was truly unique. He saved the life of his shipmate and bought time for another shipmate to escape.
That's an amazing story. You know, it brings back a lot of memories for me, dating myself back to the 60s in Groton. I remember the submarine tender, the Fulton, and my uncle worked, was assigned to that, and I remember going there and having my first cherry Coke being served that. So I remember all those old days of EB and submarine building and what submarines meant to, well, of course it still does.
Absolutely.
But, you know, back in the 60s, it was really, you know, Groton was such a small town back then. So having something as big as the submarine base and EB and everything else back then was a lot bigger deal, if you will, than people look at it today because the town's become so big. But it's always been such a very vital, important part, as I said in my introduction, and a proud part of who we all are in southeastern Connecticut.
And one of the great things about Bro's story is that he was a native of Connecticut. He lived in Putnam, Connecticut. He spent time here at least in 2 occasions in his career, probably more. A lot of submariners end up back here. And that's how I ended up here, and I ended up falling in love with the town and staying. His time in Putnam was, I think, the most profound. He was there from at least to the time he was 9 years old. The only reason we know that is because of census records. So in 1910, they were in White Plains, New York.
Wow.
And him and his 2 sisters, older sisters, were born in Connecticut. The youngest sister, Estelle, was born in New York. So it's reasonable to say he moved around 1909.
Okay.
So the first 9 years, and then when he got out of, so he didn't just serve in the United States Navy. He also served in the Royal Navy Canadian Volunteer Reserve during the First World War.
Wow.
So he was in Halifax, the timeline's up, where he was in Halifax on the HMCS Niobe, which was a depot ship at the time, to witness the Halifax explosion.
Oh.
And that's the largest man-made explosion from the Mont Blanc collision with another ship, the Imoe. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Yeah. But it destroyed Halifax, over 2,000 dead. And he was employed, his friend, Fred St. Onge, in the interview said they were employed looking for survivors in the rubble. So I actually think that's how he kept a calm head even in the middle of a major collision. Because I think he witnessed what it looks like for a hero to step up and say, take charge of what needed to get done. So after he got out, the first place he went back to was not home, it was to Putnam.
Really? Okay.
And he was on 22 Mill Street. He stayed with the St. Onges, and that's his cousins. So they stayed there for a bit, bounced around, and eventually made his way. He eventually made his way back into the Navy, but this time the United States Navy, where we have his legacy. And what's special about that in general is, I mean, think about how many sailors there were. There's one thing people may not fully realize is how much of the military is enlisted. And the Navy, it's kind of forgotten how important their contributions are. In this case, we have a unique insight into the life and times of one submariner from an era that's very rarely studied. And we're able to actually see what it was like and how his society and how his employment affected his interactions with other people.
This is a very important read, Ben. This really, I'm very impressed with what you've been telling me and what's all packed into that book. There's a tremendous amount of history, and you obviously know what you're doing.
I appreciate that.
And know what you're talking about. So that's very impressive. It brings back lots and lots of memories for me about things like growing up, the Thresher disaster and so many things that... You
may like my article on the Thresher on that note.
I would very much, yes.
It talks about how that affected submarine culture today. We still talk about the Thresher.
Oh, like I said, I was living in Groton at the time. My family, in some way or another, was all associated with the Navy base and the submarine base and all those things. So, yeah, we were very, very affected by all those things that happened. Anything that happened to anybody out at sea and on a submarine was very, very impactful on the community in Groton back those days.
It's an absolute shame. I'm glad the Navy does its part. I mean, I go up to every year to Kittery now, and that's where they do an annual remembrance that week of April 9th, and it's special to see that, and it's what I think is the important thing to remember is those things. They gave our lives. And the old joke is no joke. Excuse me. The old saying in the Navy is, all procedures are written in blood. And the reason I'm here today is because we recognize those procedures.
Yes.
And we were able to actually adapt to make sure that we were able to say all new construction, everything that passed this class, we have to do it right.
I'm very proud. I have a print from my dad's office back when the Thresher was launched. And it is an official print frame that was in his office back in the day before the disaster, but I have that original print of the Thresher, and it's oh God, how many years ago does that now go?
62 now?
Yeah.
Coming up on 62.
Yeah, and that hung in my dad's office when I was a little kid. That's how old I am.
I'm glad we haven't forgotten those lessons, but that's one of the things I really hope people take away from this book is, even in peacetime, because this is a peacetime Medal of Honor. This is before the 1963 statutory to prevent non-combat Medal of Honor recipients, and that was a decision made at the time because we had people that were so deserving. And one of the interesting things is through that research I've been able to find, and throughout my PhD research, which is an extension of this book as well, there are so many submariners who deserve great accolades and should be remembered like Bro.
Oh, absolutely.
Lloyd Beeman Ness was one of the heroes on the Squalus, which was lost in 1939.
Okay.
There was also Lawrence J. Gaynor. He crawled through the battery compartment that was actively catching on fire almost to make sure that it didn't actually catch on fire, but he's going through sparks. Maness closed the watertight door that managed to make sure that they were able to survive in the forward compartment while dooming his friends.
True heroes. Yeah.
My goal is these people should be remembered, and maybe interest in Bro's story will reignite interest into that. So those are just two examples, but I found many. One of his good shipmates who actually ended up marrying his shipmate, who ended up marrying his sister, excuse me, his name's Everett Drennan. We've forgotten about him. Even the Eternal Patrol website, where we try to remember every submariner ever lost, they didn't have him. And I was actually able to find a newspaper clipping. Specifically, I had genealogical report done by Mike France.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
And Mike France, he's acknowledged in the book and the citations.
Okay, I know him.
Yep. He actually had that done, and he was able to find Everett Drennan, and we're able to remember him now, because he actually ended up dying trying to save a young neighbor, one of his neighbor's children, from a burning house.
Really?
Yeah.
These people are just truly amazing, aren't they?
Really. Enough cannot be said. And what I really hope people will take away from this is, even in peacetime, submarining is dangerous work.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I think especially me, when you're underway, you kind of forget about it. It's the best way to deal with it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was always ready. And every submariner, the thing they say about earning your fish is what that means at the end of the day is, if I need you because I'm unconscious or unable to help, I can trust and respect that you will be able to do everything I would do in my stead.
I know my dad's happiest times were when he was at sea on a submarine. That's what he loved. That was in his blood. And that's when he was, sorry, Mom, that's when he was the happiest.
There's something special about it. There really is. Even I have these, I like to tell people that my naval career was the most difficult and the best time of my life, because you have these highs and lows, but if you really look at it, there's something about the submarine force. It's one of those special institutions that people just are glad to have been a part of, that want to be a part of it, and it really captures something. And it was around the period that Bro served that you start seeing a lot of these symbols and a lot of these identity formation occurring. So for me, that's where the PhD research is in. That I call it subculture, capital C in the middle.
Okay, right, okay.
And the subculture that formed in that period, it is actually recognizable to someone who serves now. You have things like the submarine warfare insignia, which was actually done in the same month he received his Medal of Honor.
Really? Okay.
And it was forwarded by the same admiral who upgraded his award to a Medal of Honor, Montgomery M. Taylor. And the diving tower. the diving tower is 1931.
I remember the diving tower. I do remember that.
It was in response to disasters like the '05, because that was the enduring narrative of that period, was the disabled submarine. You had the S5, which was lost in 1920, S48, which was lost in 1921. You had the S5, which was 1924, and S51, which was in a collision, and they lost all but 3 of their shipmates. So you're seeing this pattern. It's not an S4 in 1927. They finally realized we need to change the way we're doing things. We need to have a better idea of how to rescue people. It was considered a very dangerous profession, much more dangerous than even aviation.
I remember that, I don't know if it's the original diving tower, but in the 60s, I remember there being...
Yep, that's the original.
Was it really? Yeah, the big diving tower. Yep, that was like, you could almost see that from almost anywhere.
I have postcards where people brag about it.
I have an original old postcard of the diving tower when it was in its heyday. Yeah.
There's another where there's 1937. They wrote the Workers' Progress Administration. So that was actually a New Deal program where they employed out-of-work artists and writers, and they did really well. What they did is they said write local guides of the area. So in the local guide, that's what they can't wait to talk about, is you could take a tour of the submarine base, you can see the diving tower. Yeah, that was there until 1986, and a fire compromised it.
Oh, was that what it was? Okay, yeah. Okay.
I actually interviewed the commanding officer of the submarine base at the time, Swan, I want to say his last name was. He and I were talking, and he was like, everyone was wondering why, after that fire, they didn't repair it. Well, apparently, the one in Hawaii is still there, and you can visit it.
Oh,
in Pearl Harbor. Well, if you're a sailor, you can visit it.
Yep.
But he was saying Hawaii didn't have pressure differential because it was it was outside.
Okay.
So specifically, when it got cold here, it would freeze on the outside a bit, and it would, because it got cold and there was heat inside, it was warping the metal effectively and making it unstable.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't discover it until after the fire.
Oh.
So that's why they actually had to get rid of it, unfortunately.
It really was unfortunate. I know a lot of people were very upset with the fact that it was taken down.
I would love to see a memorial to that and to the people who went on it too, because that would be a cool. Maybe we'll find a way to incorporate that in the Groton Sail stuff.
Yeah, I know. I'm friends with Marion Galbraith, and I know about the Groton Sail Foundation, and that they're trying to put up that memorial over by the library.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe that'd be a cool one to reach out to.
Wouldn't that be great? Yeah.
So another one that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a submarine named in his honor, Bro's honor.
Are you really? That would be very special.
So because his story was kind of lost, no submarine has been named in his honor. Or no ship whatsoever. They usually name surface ships like destroyers.
Okay.
So we have the Momsen, which is a destroyer, O'Kane. These are all submarine heroes. Now, I think it's not only worthy, but as special because of the only enlisted. It would remind people of the importance of enlisted submariners. And I think it would connect submariners to their heritage in a way it connected me. And I think a lot of communities like Groton and Putnam, for example, could benefit greatly because he spent a lot of time in different areas. He was in Newport, Rhode Island. He died at the Naval Hospital there. He went to Recruit Training Command in Newport. He's from Connecticut. He has ties to both Groton and Putnam. He spent time in Washington. He spent time in California and all 3 shipyards at the time,
really?
Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. And he spent time in Hawaii, and he spent a lot of time in the Asiatic theater, which was Manila. So I think it'd be a win-win for everybody, and I think a USS Henry Bro could be a really good thing for the submarine force and for the country.
Certainly would be. Now let's talk a little bit more about you. We're down to 5 minutes. I learned about you because you did a talk at the Bill Memorial Library, I believe. So are you going around doing talks or book tours or signings or that type of thing?
I'm always doing book signings. I'm always looking for new places to do book signings as well.
Okay.
My last one I had scheduled was the Bill Memorial Library, and that one was a great success. The other areas I've done it is in Putnam. I've done it in the Albacore Museum. I'm going to have one in the near future with the Submarine Force Library and Museum. We just need to get books into them, and I'm working with my publisher to make sure that they can get that.
Yes.
The people there are awesome. Kathy Lotring and Wendy Gully are the primary people. They're phenomenal people, and I appreciate everything they've done for his story in the past. But I do plan on having more. My next one, unfortunately, is only not till January, and it's in Kittery, Maine.
Okay.
But I do, as soon as I can find venues, I'm looking at Subvets, the VFW, over in New
Oops.
London, potentially, if they're willing to help me. But
Yeah.
yeah, keep an eye out. My Facebook page is The Silent Services First Hero. And as soon as I'm able to get them, I'll put them on there and you can register there.
Now, because I was going to ask you, where can people find this book?
Everywhere right now. Amazon, Barnes & Nobles,
Really?
Books A
Wonderful.
Million. It's formally published through Pen and Sword Maritime, but it's in the United States with Casemate.
So it's out there.
Yeah.
Everybody, get a copy of this book. Obviously, from just listening to Ryan, you know he's passionate. You know he obviously knows what he's talking about. And, you know, the untold stories of all these heroes need to be told.
100% agree.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's wonderful. And so, again, where did you accumulate some of these fabulous photos that you have, these historical photos?
Actually show that one. Most of them are from the Library of Congress or his official military personnel file.
Okay.
The Medal of Honor ones are pictures taken by a newspaper reporter in the Library of Congress donated. But there's one in there, the official military personnel file, that you can see 2 months before he passed away.
Really?
And in that one, you get to see what a 20-year career at sea used to look like. It took a toll on people.
Really? Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine it would.
So yeah, it loved every bit of research, and it was an absolute blast. And I hope everyone enjoys reading it because it's special.
Just looking, you know, people, when you buy your copy, which you're going to do, because you're going to want this book, the closer you look, you can't see all the details on this cover photo, and of course what's in the back. But it's packed with a lot of things that to me, as I'm looking at this book, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I'm like drawn in just by what you've got on the cover of this book.
They did a really good job with the cover.
Yeah, it makes you want to open this up and read it. So while we're down to our last couple of minutes, is there anything I haven't asked you, or anything you'd like to say to the audience before we start closing out?
Help get a submarine named in honor of Burrow, please. I think it would help a lot.
Listen to that, folks. I think that's very, very smart. Well, Ryan, I want to thank you very much for being my guest today, sharing the story about this wonderful person, this wonderful book, and yourself, your history, obviously your great knowledge. So thank you so much for being my guest today. I really, truly appreciate it, and I wish you all the best with your book.
Thank you kindly.
And everyone, please, as I said, buy this book. It's a must-read. Anybody in this area, you know, we all love our submariners, the submarines, everything. It means so much to our community. So support everyone. Buy this book, read it. It's going to be great. Thank you for tuning in to Around the Town with Mark. And always remember, the studio is open. We're also an art gallery. And it's a nonprofit organization. We'd love to have you stop by, come in, look. There's art for sale. I've got one of my pieces here, plug. And, you know, come in and visit with us. It's very open and very friendly. If you want to come in and watch a taping, contact me, and I'd be happy to welcome you here. It's a very open, happy studio. And again, thank you for tuning in to Around the Town with Mark. We hope to see you again on Around the Town with Mark very, very soon. And again, thank you so much, Ryan C. Walker, for being my guest today.
I appreciate it.